Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Salsabila Calvinatasya from 9B, and today I'm going to tell you a story about Gellert the faithful dog. Let's begin. A prince once lived in the mountains of Wales. He had a fine castle and many servants. He owned much property and had many riches. But the most precious thing in his life was his own young son. He loved his son more than anything in his life. Next to his son was his friend, companion, and playmate, Gellert. Gellert was a powerful hound. The prince had raised him from a pup. They had run together, played together, and hunted together for years. When his master was gone, Gellert roamed the castle lands, protecting his master's properties from wolves and other wild creatures. One day, the prince decided to go hunting. Gellert stood by his side, ready to join him. "Not today," said the prince to his dog. "You stay at home to watch my sleeping son while I am gone." Gellert seemed to understand and quickly went to the room and protected his little master. "No one or thing shall come near my little master," thought Gellert to himself. The day went by quickly and the hunt ended. The prince decided to go back home, but then he was greeted by some worried servants. "Sire, your son, your son!" they exclaimed. The prince ran into the palace and started for his son's room. He passed his big hound and ran to the side of the cradle. It was empty. His son's blanket was on the floor. It had bloody paw prints on it. Gellert barked loudly. The prince looked at him and saw the blood all over his fur and all across the room. How could you?" the prince shouted. "I left you to watch over my son. I thought I could trust you." Then the prince drew his sword and killed his former pet. The prince stood over the body of his dead hound with tears in his eyes. As he stood there, he heard laughter. The sound came from the far side of his son's cradle. The prince ran across the room, and there on the floor was his son and two dead wolves pulling on his hair. The prince suddenly realized what had happened. The wolf came into the castle through an open door and had tried to harm his son, but Gellert had killed them and saved them. Just as he was happy to have his son alive, the prince was just as sad because he had killed his best friend without thinking. He had jumped into conclusions and did something he could never undo. The prince buried his faithful hound and marked the grave with a special monument. For the rest of his life, the prince did his best to never jump to conclusions. When one jumps into conclusions and acts in haste, they might do something they will regret forever. So, make sure you think before you act, because not everything is what it seems. It could be something else, because there's always another side to a story. So, that is my story. Thank you so much for listening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.